Good afternoon. Makes me think of Tommy's statement on the Greg Allman tour. Y'all are mighty pretty. And Kathleen and Patty and your family, along with all of this room, I want to thank you for sharing Tommy. You sacrificed a lot for us to have some great times on the road. And Kathleen, your father, he was gone a lot, but you had the pleasure of seeing his talents, both sides of his talents. I loved it when you told me your kids saw the article in the paper and they had no idea. You know, that's really cute. I first connected with Tommy in 1974. Like Terry, it was the Greg Allman tour at the Fox. I was a student at Georgia Tech, and I just walked over each night. And the first time I saw Tommy, it was just an immediate connection. I loved his playing. I loved his style that he played in. I loved the clothes he was wearing. Tommy was the stylist, kind of like Ephraim in the Derek Trucks band, or the Tedeschi Trucks band. You know, he knows how to dress. He always had the best shoes. He was the coolest dude on the stage, even though Greg was on the stage. That's what I thought of Tommy, and that's what my wife thought of Tommy. Anyway, I saw him shortly after that at the Southeast Music Hall. We had an encounter backstage. We both had been overserved, and I often kidded him about that second time I met him. You know, this room is full of very special people, and I often mention to Tommy, I really admired the people he led into his circle because they were a good reflection of his good soul. You know, you are. And Tommy would often quote those kind of things in his songs. His songs were amazing. He was my favorite songwriter. I put Randall Brownlet right up there too. Those two are something else. And I had always hoped we could have a trio, you know, kind of thing down at your studio. I thought that would have been educational for both sides, you know. Over the past 3 years, Tommy and I were working on an anthology, and the genesis of it was I was making a playlist for my iPhone, and I got up to about 65 songs, and I was like, Tommy, we need to make an anthology. He really, in terms of quantity and quality, he's the greatest songwriter I know. And so we started working on this anthology, and you know, I got to figure I'm one of Tommy's top fans. I still call myself a fan. And so I got to hear all kind of songs I hadn't heard before. And let me tell you, when he was a teenager, when he was about 15, he was in a band called We the People. And he shared with me newspaper articles about this band that talked about them being the beginnings of the Florida garage band sound and kind of the beginning of punk, surprisingly. And there are about 40 songs that I got to listen to, and they are so special with their teen angst. You know, there's one song called You Burn Me Up and You Burn Me Down. And I think every male in this room remembers that as a teenage boy. You know, those girls did it to us. And I loved listening to those songs. There were 4 or 5 that we picked to be on this anthology. And at that time, they got signed to RCA Records, and they recorded in the same studio Elvis Presley did up in Nashville. So that's pretty cool. They had regional hits, and you know, it was a pretty popular band. But even in one song, Tommy talked about "I'm not happy doing this" in the lyrics, and he left the band shortly after that. But some great songs, and this project. It was such a joy because I thought it would give Tommy and I something to reflect on while he was going through what he was going through, and while I was going through what I was going through, and I never wanted it to be a job. I wanted it just to be fun, and we got a long ways, but Tommy was the important part behind it. I got to enjoy his inspirations behind a lot of his songs. That was something he didn't share with a lot of people. we ended up, when I first saw him at the Fox and I felt that strong, strong connection, I think it was fate's way of nudging me and telling me that we were going to do something together in the future. And we ended up doing 4 CDs with Tommy at Hitting the Note Records and a Cowboy Reunion CD. And it was such a pleasure watching those songs come together from an acoustic guitar to a fleshed out band arrangement. It was wonderful. Let me give you a little bit more history from the We the People. After We the People broke up, Tommy and Ovi Sparks moved out to California. And the folk rock influences that Tommy picked up from being out there with a band called Timber and some other LA musicians really grew him musically towards what would become the country rock of Cowboy. I think everybody's pretty familiar with Cowboy and the Capricorn story, so I won't go into too much detail there, but I think Dwayne turned Phil onto him, and they made a number of great albums. They were the house band for so many artists. Tommy guested on so many albums. Alex Taylor, Bonnie Bramlett, Billy Joe Shaver, Clarence Carter, Corky Lang, Johnny Rivers, Kitty Wells, Paul Butterfield, Dickie Betts, Martin Mull, the Allman Brothers. Pretty good list of world-class talent. After Cowboy broke up, Tommy and Bill Stewart and Johnny Sandlin had a killer album made by a band called the TSS. And it had some absolutely fantastic songs on it. And one of the songs, the title song, was Happy to Be Alive. It was so cool to hear stories about this time. Tommy would just, if you ever went on a road trip with him, you knew you'd hear some great stories. Back in, I guess it was about 1977, Cowboy got back together, and they put out an album titled Cowboy, and it was, again, it had some touching love songs, and I was so happy to see those guys back together. In 1994, Tommy moved to Europe for 9 years, I think it was 9, and got married, had a beautiful daughter, and played in a band called the Rebelizers, and some of the members of that band were from Alvin Lee's band. And then when Tommy came back to America, Terry Reeves played me a CD that had been released in Europe and asked if Hitting the Note Records would like to release it. And it was called, fittingly, Someone Else's Shoes. Tommy was always a shoe. What's the right word I should use? I don't want to use an S word, but anyway, so we picked that up and added some songs to it, and we ended up putting 4 CDs out by Tommy and a Cowboy Reunion CD out in 2010. And after the Allman Brothers retired and Vicki and I retired, we gave Hitting the Note to the Big House, and around that time, Tommy released another CD called Somewhere South of Eden that was beautiful. He also recorded 2 acoustic CDs. One was called From the Nut House. I'm not sure. That may be Muscle Shoals. It may be, is that right? Thank you. Live at the Nut House. And another one that a gentleman from Germany, Andreas, acoustic. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that was a great album. So, fast forward here. We went down to Capricorn Records in Macon and recorded 7 songs for this anthology. Tommy had written, I think, some of the best songs of his life. And it was so cool to see the old friends get together at the clubhouse. That's what they call Capricorn. And we heard some stories that I can't repeat from this stage, but you probably have heard them out there. Anyway, it was so cool to see the love between Chuck Lavelle and Randall Bramlett, Charlie Hayward, Bill Stewart, Ricky Hirsch, the engineers. There was love in that room, and the love showed in each song. And I think all of us knew it might be the last time that this group of cowboys would be in the clubhouse, and it made it very special. The results are brilliant. The compositions are full of Tommy Talton's essence. I mean, they're thoughtful, choice lyrics, splendid solos and jams. He had a great affection for some what Derek calls quiet intensity, and noodling on the guitar and just making it sound ethereal. And he had those long, impressive outros. So it's got all the classic Tommy Talton stuff. It's 7 songs. We're not going to release the anthology currently because there's a lot missing from Tommy not being here. But we are going to release these 7 songs hopefully next week. And it's got some things from Bill Thames. It's got some things from Michael Pierce that's working on it. So it's good people behind Tommy's effort. I want to leave you with a final thing, and I think Kathleen's going to speak on this a lot more. I absolutely believe in life going on, and the final words that Tommy spoke just added to that. I'm so convinced. And so the gift Tommy gave me, the last gift he gave me, is my depth of his parting, my depth of my grief is not near so deep, knowing that he still exists. And I look forward to catching up with him on whatever adventure he's on, and we're going to meet again in the sweet by and by. Thank you.